Hello, and welcome back to Extra Literary Affairs, a podcast for the lit curious reader, because why not read a little of everything? I'm Joey Kelly.
And I'm Jennifer Smith.
And today we are having an affair with Malachi McIntosh and his short story, White Wedding, from his collection, Parables, Fables, Nightmares.
Malachi McIntosh is new to me, and he was not at all what I was expecting based on the name that was presented. I'm happy to share a little bit about what we learned about this author. Malachi McIntosh is the winner of the Edge Prize for the Best Debut Collection in 2024. His short story collection is darkly comedic and surreal. It's about contemporary life, and it also earned him a Royal Society of Literature Giles Award for Nonfiction in a related work. So a highly celebrated debut, which we always love hearing from new authors on this channel. His research defines Caribbean literature as a literature movement. His scholarly work, particularly his study on emigration and Caribbean literature, argues that migration is not just a theme, but the central defining condition of the Caribbean cultural identity. He posits that the core of this literary tradition is shaped by the experience of journeys across the oceans, cultural transformation, and the act of building identity between homelands and new environments. And the third interesting fact about McIntosh is that he doesn't only analyze identity academically, he also explores it through his creative writing, like the piece we read today, White Wedding. His short stories translate complex themes like belonging, memory, and displacement into intimate, emotional, and sometimes surreal narratives, demonstrating how his scholarly insights directly inspire and enrich his artistic expression. And Joey, this guy was very funny. This is a quirky story. I can't wait to talk to you about it.
Yeah. Okay, but before we go, we got to start with a joke to get our funny bones all warmed up. So this is yet again a joke that is not my own, but from the Vicar of Dibley, which all of my jokes are going to be from there. So they're not my jokes. Also, this is British. The bonnet is the hood of a car. Two nuns are driving through Transylvania when a great big vampire jumps on the bonnet. One nun says to the other, "Show him your cross." So the nun opens the window and yells, "Get off my bonnet, you toothy git." Hilarious,
Joey, and really tied to the UK and British pronunciation and word choice.
This author's British, I think.
He's British, but he's also in some way rooted in the Caribbean. What is he about? I don't know, Joey. This is not what I expected. I would love to read a short summary of White Wedding, which is the short story we picked for today. In White Wedding, a sexually frustrated fiancé resolves to abstain from masturbation for an entire month, believing the self-denial will intensify the passion of his impending honeymoon. Now, he does have that arrangement also with his fiancé that they will not be having sex together, but they never agreed to the self-love that he is restraining from. This restraint transforms his anatomy into, and I quote, "some wild Grecian deity in his genes, storming at every mild provocation and threatening to enter the world of men and set things right." So when the penis is a character in a story, we know we are in a good time, Joey, and we are definitely well-rooted in our month of April exploring these very fun and sexy themes. While he finally succumbs to temptation, he spends hours in this shameful, according to him, but intense bout of self-gratification. His erection refuses to subside. What remains is a persistent condition that leaves his member resembling, and I quote, "a hitchhiker's thumb forever thrusting out below his waistband, and an enduring and comically tragic emblem of his failed discipline before his marriage." So, Joey, what were your initial impressions on reading the story for the first time? Because, wow, there's a lot.
Okay, before we do initial impressions, let's talk about weddings really quick. What is your ideal wedding or funny memory that you have of a wedding that you've been to?
I will say that something very recent happened to me that my partner and I were able to recollect. So last year on Easter, we went to a brewery outside of Boston and we were so excited. It was the first time I was there. We get there early. There's a bouncer holding off the crowds from coming in. It's noon. Let us in. I'm watching people walk up through the parking lot and they're in evening dresses and this really fine attire. And it's like, dude, we're at a brewery. What is this? Well, little did we know they were having a wedding taking place in the brewery. So my partner and I were just there this weekend reminiscing about how cool it was for those people to get married and had the reception at that brewery. But for me, the best wedding memory that I have yet to have is that I would love to have a pop-up wedding in the cathedral at Notre Dame with a handful of really close friends. That is my dream wedding scenario.
Wow,
And since I
fancy.
have yet to wed, who knows? Could happen.
You
It's a great
never
dream.
know. Yeah. Don't let your dreams be dreams. Go get it, girl. Hopefully it'll be rebuilt by then.
Yeah, it's open.
Oh, it is? Okay, good. That's
They're
good.
reopened. Chris has gotten the alert. He knows what is in store. Hint, hint.
Okay, that's a good one.
How about you, Joey? Do you have an ideal wedding scenario or a funny memory from one of the weddings you've attended in the past?
If I ever got married one day, I don't think I would actually have a wedding. I would skip it. I would just elope or something and just sign a document and be done. I don't really care about that. Not to yuck everyone else's yums. Weddings are fun. Okay, so I'm not saying don't invite me to your weddings, people. But a funny memory is that I went to this wedding and the DJ was playing all slow songs. Okay, and nobody was dancing the entire time. And the bride went up to the DJ and was like, "Can you stop? Because like literally no one's having any fun because you're only playing slow songs." And he said no, and he refused, and he didn't play songs that she requested, even though they paid him. And he made sure to fill up on booze and food, and he took full advantage of that wedding and refused. We all watched him because it was quiet. And she was like, "Can you stop?" And he was like, "No, everyone's really liking this." And we're like, "Okay, but there's no one out on the dance floor." And so that's my funny
Joey, I love
memory.
that. I love that story because it does tie into expectations management. And this story in particular, White Wedding, is all about who pays, what's a wedding for, who's in charge. And I'm sorry, Joey, I believe that the bride, generally speaking, is in charge of the wedding. And so if she walks up to the DJ and she's like, "Hey, this isn't really working out. Can you switch it up?" And the answer is no, everybody's having a great time. You know who gets to decide if you're having a great time at the wedding? Possibly the people at the wedding who aren't you. So
Yeah.
yeah, just super curious.
If you've been hired by someone as a DJ and they say, "Don't do this," and then you do it anyway, I don't know what the problem is. But okay, Jennifer, what did you think about this story?
I was really surprised by this story. I did find a lot of humor in it. And Joey, I think you might know this about me. I don't generally read stories that are so penis forward. A very big plot point was this man and his desire to create some extra spicy intimacy with his partner and rekindle the flame. And the fact that he literally says that he goes insane and he's howling around like a dog on all fours by the end of the recounting of the story, I'm like, yeah, that rings true. That sounds right. He did go insane from lack of sex. That was that guy's experience. Joey, but I really had a lot of fun with the story. And I know we'll talk more about specific elements, but what stood out for you and what was this experience like for you? Because obviously I know the female perspective on that particular experience, but I don't know the male's perspective on was that plausible or was that totally just a wacky idea?
Well, that would not apply to me, but I have a very different relationship with sex. But anyway, that's what this episode's about. But I really like the story. I found it to be like laugh out loud funny. And that's why I wanted to read it because I was like, this literally made me laugh out loud. I was not expecting this. And I think the author names it White Wedding, and you have this idea that it's going to be not mundane, but pretty run of the mill. We all know what an ideal wedding would look like, a stereotypical one. And so I really like that he pulls back the curtain and says, this is actually what's going on when someone's getting married. It's messy, it's nuanced, it's complex back there. It's not just this one day. That's one of the things I want to talk about is why do we have this idea of a white wedding and these very traditional values or ideas about what a wedding should look like? I ended up reading the entire collection, which sometimes I don't do for stories that we read. But I ended up reading the whole collection. And I had to say, this is the only good one. There was one that was called Limbs, where a guy is sent a mysterious giant crate to his apartment, and inside is just people's limbs. And that one's okay. But I felt like the rest of them were kind of half-baked almost, like, he didn't complete his thought while he was writing them. It's a debut, so you have to kinda give him a little grace because he did it, and he won an award for it, so I guess, some people like it. I was kind of surprised that this one seemed so well thought out and is, like, really funny. A lot of people liked it on the reviews I saw on Storygraph, but because we read short stories so much, obviously, that's our whole brand, we always say, is this a complete story? Do we have enough information? Can we imagine that this story continues on after the story itself has ended on the page? And I don't think that that's true for the rest of the stories in this collection, except for maybe Limbs. So I was kind of surprised, but I am still interested. I think this was a really strong short story, and I'm curious as to what else the author has put out or will be putting out. So I'll definitely be checking out more of his stuff.
Yeah, Joey, I thought what was interesting, yes, there were definitely some laugh out loud moments and some moments of like, oh, this poor guy and this poor family. There were very interesting ways in which he structured the story. It's a very short story. It's 3 pages. It's not long. He packed a lot in. But the reason I'm laughing, Joey, is that it starts out with numbered sections 1 through 10. And so you're like, okay, you're setting the stage. These are little vignettes. We totally get it. And I was chuckling because I was reading this aloud to my partner, and the first sentence is, the first problem was the Botox. And we're like, uh-oh, plastic surgery procedures gone wrong. You can't undo that. And I'm chuckling, Joey, because my partner said, oh yeah, no one ever should get Botox or any procedure within 1 month prior to a big event because you're just asking for trouble. So the fact that this lady sneezed and had more injected into her, that was relatable, but also ridiculous. And one of the sentences, it goes into, okay, here's the first problem. Then he lists out all these other problems. His best man is such a jerk. I can't even begin to comprehend how you would choose this person as your best man if you know he's going to give a speech that's horrible and reveals a secret that you've been keeping. I know that in your family, there has been within the last year or two, big wedding. I'm just curious. I've never been asked to give this speech, but there's some, pretty good rules of the road. If they say, please don't mention this, you don't. And in this particular story, they said the best man mentioned the secret 7 times after they told him not to do that. But Joey, I want to read just one sentence because I was like, are you kidding me? This is just an example of his interesting writing style that wasn't throughout the entire bit, but I found this very interesting. So it said, the groom's mother took that chance to lean back on the couch, cross her legs, and say with a dismissive swipe of her hand that the impending and necessary total economic collapse meant that they might as well blow all their savings on a wedding that would, let's be honest with each other, probably fail in a year or so unless the bride got pregnant, which would, she said this part conspiratorially to the bride's mother, as we know, only prolonged the agony of being shackled to a man in a relationship of dominance and subjection predicated on the perpetuation of systems of hetero-patriarchal, phalliocentripetal force. This while the 2 men stepped across the room to each other, the polo shirt and the khaki shorts of the one silently wailing at the flak jacket and fatigues of the other. So yes, Joey, have I been speaking for 10 minutes on this sentence? Yes,
It's a long
I
sentence.
have. But that literally is all one sentence, and there is so much packed in there. And the reason I chose that is there's this, what I'm going to call made up words. I do not believe that phalliocentripetal force is a thing, but maybe it's just not something that has occurred to me.
All things revolve around the penis. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally get the concept, but I don't think that's a word that the groom's mother is going to be like, oh, by the way, let me just throw this out here. And I just thought that was really fun, really playful, a little cerebral, because there was a couple of things that he mentioned in here that I was like, did you just make that up or is that actually a word? So if you're looking for a story that is very funny, it is a lot about male anatomy and sex acts and all the things that might go around that, but also makes you go, I better check the dictionary because I'm not sure exactly what this word means. This is the story for you.
It's so funny that you read that quote because that was the quote that I was about to read. So we obviously were on the same page. It's not a real word, so it doesn't matter how you pronounce it anyway. I really love that line. It's a very long line. But again, I think it underscores this idea that it's not always this picturesque moment, a wedding, and that some people have different feelings going into this event. I really appreciate that he is subverting our expectations so much, as I said in the beginning, because the story is called White Wedding. So we already have this idea of like purity and chastity and maidenhood. And that's why, women wear white because it's supposed to symbolize their virginity. We're reading the same quote. So we're obviously paying attention to the same parts of the story, which is interesting because that doesn't always happen like that. Usually I'm like, oh, I didn't even notice that. I'll read the section about the Botox because I think it's funny that the very first thing we know is it's a white wedding, okay? And then the very first piece of information is that this woman is penetrated in some way, which would sort of besmirch her, okay? So she's no longer as virginal or pure as she once would have been because she is injecting Botox into her own skin.
And that is done for vanity.
Mm-hmm.
And it is also done to, he says, when she feels displeasure, she gets like a little tick on her eyebrow. So I also thought it's like, well, don't let me show any displeasure on my wedding day. I better remove my ability to emote anything that's not joy and positivity. So I thought that was also curious, Joey.
Or any emotion at all. Because if you get enough filler and Botox, you cannot emote at all. But anyway, the opening you were talking about earlier says, the first problem was the Botox. The goal had been for the bride to get a small touch just above her left eyebrow, which in times of crisis had the tendency to betray her with a tick. Unfortunately, a dog had just been at the salon an hour before she arrived. The woman administering the shot did the eyebrow fine, but suggested perhaps one further dose above the bridge of the nose, preventatively. The bride said yes, fixed her face, then sneezed, the whole needle to the hilt into her tear duct. She returned home 6 hours later to the flat she shared with the groom, the whole of the left side of her head frozen, immobile, drooping, and baby skin smooth. You could wear a mask, he suggested. It's funny, first of all, because you can imagine a lot of the scenes in this story, like you were saying about how the groom-to-be is on all fours and he has his fiance's workout shorts over his face and his nose because he's sniffing like a little weirdo and is on all fours and is howling like a dog. But again, we have this very visceral image of someone sneezing and a needle going all the way in and penetrating her face. So I really like that is the way that he decided to open this story because it really made me think, why do we traditionally uphold this idea of people wearing white when they're getting married? Like, we're in the year of our Lord 2026, okay? Virginity doesn't matter anymore. Well, at least in the culture that I have grown up in, if you're not a virgin before you get married, it's not a big deal. And also it'd kind of be like, what do you mean? What's the saying? Don't buy the cow when you can get the milk for free, kind of thing. If you don't know what sex is like. Anyway.
Joey, I have a different phrase that I'd like to share with you.
Sure.
It is try before you buy.
Yeah.
So for me, I get it.
Yeah, I mean, it would be kind of strange if you were virginal, unless you were like really young, I guess, but then like don't get married. But anyway, and it made me also think, why do we still do this? Why is it necessary to wear white? Why is that a tradition that we feel is necessary still? But the immense pressure that is put on this singular day where it has to be perfect, when nothing can be perfect, so then why bother? I mean, not like why bother trying, but why put that much pressure on yourself to have this absolutely picture perfect day where not a single thing can go wrong? I think he spends the whole story saying it's not possible. It's not possible for you to do that because from the very beginning of the story, it's never going to be perfect. The bride can't control the left side of her face.
The groom can't control anything below the waistline, Joey,
Yeah.
so they're even. But I love that you asked the question because, yes, we start the story and it's called White Wedding. So in my mind, it's going to be traditional. It's going to be romantic. It is going to be this profound union of two people. And he starts out, and I just want to read the problems, Joey. So he said the first problem was the Botox. Okay, we've covered that. The second problem was the best man. And again, these are the opening sentences of these paragraphs. So he enumerates all the things that are wrong with his best man, who is just, yeah, I'm glad he's not my friend. The third problem was the bride and the groom's parents. And I'm going to read because I loved it so much. The third problem was with the bride and groom's parents, who hated each other. All of them. Both sets of parents hated their own partners, and each individual hated all the others. That was also funny. That's going to be a great reception trying to keep people from feuding. The fourth problem was with the groom's penis, which stopped working at 15:30 on Saturday, the 6th of May, 1 week before the wedding. Just a funny sentence to actually have to read aloud. I'm like, well, let's just document that. He puts it all together. And I love the way he broke the story down. He says 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, there were other problems. And he just goes through this whole list of all the other problems that did not get their own section. And then we finally get to section 10, which is when the event actually occurs. I love the way the story ended, but it was also like, yes, everything that you worried about didn't come true. Nobody noticed what was going on in your pants. Nobody cares. It's fine. So that was basically the story for me.
Yeah, I do like that he lists all these problems out. And the emphasis of the story is not the motivation or the love story between the bride and groom, who are both not named anyway. So it doesn't matter. And it's more about the institution of marriage and not about the individual couple getting married. Again, I really like that because it made me question, what is the purpose of marriage then? Because if we're going to learn about a wedding, then you would assume that we were going to learn about the couple who is going to get married. But that's not what he gives us. He gives us a list of issues. And so despite those issues, they're still getting married. So it's a hopeful message. What I would think in the end is despite all of these shortcomings or issues, that they can still be in this relationship.
And Joey, they said that they were in this relationship for 5 years. So that also was interesting to me, dealing with a large extended family on my mom's side and seeing lots of weddings and divorces and babies and all the things. The one thing I know for sure, 100% know for sure, is you cannot control your family for 5 minutes. They are not going to behave. Someone is going to get into an argument. There's going to be a fight. Maybe the police are called. Maybe they're not. Maybe it lasts a year and you still haven't paid off your wedding bills by the time your divorce papers come through. There's just a lot of things that in this story they brought up. Like, let's be honest, if she doesn't get knocked up and have a kid in the first year, this divorce is going to happen sooner rather than later. So when you said this was a hopeful message, it's like, but they still got married. For the love of God, why?
Yeah.
Right? Why would they do that? And the dad was like, oh, it's going to cost us 31,000 pounds for this beautiful day, this sacred day for my daughter, my princess. She gets whatever she wants. It's like 31,000 pounds is a down payment on a house. Why would anyone ever do this? Especially if you, in my mind, like, oh, romantic notion. Your parents get together and they say really nice things about you and each other. And then your best friend gets up and is so excited about how much he loves both of you. I don't want to spoil it, Joey, but the bride, the groom, and the best friend all met each other for the first time at a sex party. And they had multiple configurations of sexual activity. And they don't even exactly remember who did what to whom and why and how,
Yeah.
because they were drugged without their consent by going to this sex party. So just that whole thing that we often talk about, it's like, everyone don't yuck on my yum. Everyone does what everyone wants to do. We are not shaming anyone for their choices. But this story was like, should we be honest? Should we lie? Should we perpetuate this idea that there's so much romance? It cracked up because it's the first time of 4 times that the groom proposed to the bride. So if you have to propose 4 times, I don't know, like 3rd time's the charm.
But
the
like,
4th
take a
time,
hint.
it's just like, maybe don't. But he said the first time he proposed to her, they're still at the sex party. They wake up the next day and she's still asleep. And he's like, oh my God, I love you so much. He's like, do you want to get married? She's like, no, maybe you can just invite me for coffee.
Yeah.
Maybe we should
Start
just start
small.
there. Like, a normal thing. I think there's a cultural trope that women are pushing men to get married. Like, we as a gender, oh, we've got to nest, we've got to do this, we've got to make it official. It's got to be this big thing. And in this story, it's kind of turned on its head because the guy's like, oh my God, I just had sex and this is awesome. Can we get married? And she's like, don't be a
chill,
freak.
bro.
Can you just call me? Let's
Yeah.
start with one little thing. And then 5 years later, they're on the cusp of their marriage. They're living together, according to him. But Joey, and I know this is going to take a turn, I thought this brought up ideas for me of what happens in purity culture or in severe limitation of men and women being able to interact in what I consider a human nature, natural way. How insane men can be when they are not engaging in the sexual experiences that they had hoped for. So I'm thinking about strict religious sects who don't allow premarital sex. I'm also thinking about incels that they just aren't getting the sex that they want. And so they
Yeah.
kind of go insane and hate women all day, every day. I've not experienced these people
Yeah,
myself. I just thought that was also a larger picture of denying yourself for a quote unquote good reason isn't a good reason. It turned him into a centaur. He just turned into this wild
yeah.
half man, half animal thing
Like
rutting around the
maybe a
floor.
Yeti.
Maybe a Yeti.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think this is another way that he subverts the expectation of the story because historically women have been attributed as being the sex-crazed gender, where don't trust a woman, she'll try to have sex with you and then she'll turn you to a life of sin, okay? We have original sin with Adam and Eve, obviously.
I got to back it up. I think what you're trying to say, because what I just heard, I was like, it's not that women are dying for it and they're seducing these men, but I do think there is a trope, going back to Adam and Eve, as you said, that are going to be the temptress, who are going to use their natural charms that they just can't help to get men to do their bidding. Is that where you were going?
Sort of. I'm talking about in the Middle Ages is when I've thrown this back to. Obviously, Christianity is before the medieval era. Okay, it's antiquity. But anyway, so that is where I think he's subverting that tradition, as that women were these, as you said, temptresses who would lure men into sin because they could not physically stop themselves from having sex. They were just too horny all the time. And obviously that's not true. Okay. I mean, everyone experiences sexual attraction differently and to different capacities, and they have always, okay, no matter what they said.
I have to phrase an objection or a question. I love the idea that you're bringing up. But for me, chastity belts, locking down a woman's virginity, literally putting that under lock and key. I felt that was to keep men out. It wasn't from
No,
letting the
it was
women
the
do what
opposite.
they wanted.
Yeah.
It was to keep the men out. We're like, I got to lock that down.
No, it was
Because
to
there's
keep
no
women from doing
lockdown on men.
Yeah, I don't think chastity belts were a real thing. I think they're just a myth. I don't know that there's any historical record. But anyway, we still have this idea. We have this cultural consciousness of that chastity belts were a real thing.
And in this story, because he has this erection that he cannot control, he takes a belt, not a chastity belt, but he straps his penis to his leg so it is not offending others. Maybe that's like a male chastity belt. Tie that thing down. I don't know, just a curious thing I had not thought about before this exact moment in conversation, Joey. It's a lot.
Yeah. I don't mean that I think women are sex hungry. I mean, some women are, sure. But generally, everyone is nuanced. And so that's not what I was talking about. But if he's talking about traditional values starting in the Middle Ages, and even earlier than that too, but we'll just go to the Middle Ages, that women would have been the more interested gender in sex in general. But he doesn't give us that. He gives us this image of this man who is acting almost like a beast or an animal on all fours, howling like a dog. I mean, it's like funny. I can imagine this happening, like I said, with the syringe or the needle. These are all visceral depictions that you're like, oh yeah, I know exactly what you're trying to say. It's funny. I don't know what the authorial intent was in here, but it feels like it was a lot deeper than that, and that he was trying to critique what our expectations are, even historically. Or maybe it was just me. I don't know.
It's so interesting for me to hear that perspective for you because obviously I am a heterosexual female. So I have lived through my own experience of how I am in the world, how my friends are, how men are in my experience. And you have a very different lived experience. So in my cultural upbringing in the 80s and 90s, women had to defend against men because men are always going to try to be putting it to you. If you're any kind of girl, in my experience, somebody's just going to push the limits to see what they can get. And at least from my education as a young person, we were always told be on guard because guys are going to try stuff. No one ever said, don't you as the girl try stuff, or how do you feel about it, or what would you like to do to be empowered? It was more like, you better keep those boys out of your business. That is not a thing. You wait till marriage. Don't do it. And that could also be a generational thing or growing up in the Midwest. But for me, that was very much the men are the sexual aggressors, the women are the defenders of their own self. Yeah, just a very curious flip.
I think in this story and the last story in Yeti Lovemaking, to your point, is that we have two women who are unnamed, and they are both very sexually empowered, where they can decide, like in the Ling Ma story, Yeti Lovemaking, this woman goes home for a one-night stand with this guy, and her friend's like, are you sure? That sounds kind of dangerous. She's like, yeah, why not? I don't care. I'm gonna do it anyway. He's kind of cute or whatever, okay? And then the woman in this story, the bride-to-be, goes to sex parties and has orgies. She wakes up next to a strange dude and she's like, okay, you want to marry me, but all right, you're kind of cute, but I don't want to marry you. I just want to go out for coffee first. Like, chill out, bro. It sounded sort of like they might still have sex with his best man, which again, is totally fine. They could be polyamorous. But I think it's funny that in both of these stories, we have women that don't seem to have to be on their guard around men, that they are like, I choose who my partners are, and that's it. End of story.
Joey, thank you for saying that because that was a detail that I missed. It just didn't click in my consciousness. All three of them met, as you said, at a sex party. I appreciate that you reminded us that she voluntarily went to a sex party. And if you join an organization called the Free Love Society and you get invited to an event, yes, she's experiencing her own sexual empowerment. So that was a detail that I missed in my reading of that. I did not consider that perspective, that she's not having to defend anything. She's like, I'm down.
Down to clown.
I am here to experience all that this experience might be. However, Joey, I did have a little touch of irritation in this story because they said that they were given substances without their consent and they do not recall what happened to them. So
Yeah,
that
that's
is
no good.
always not okay. That is 100% not okay. And I realize this is a fictionalized story, but of all the absurdities and all of the things that happened in this story, that was the one thing that gave me pause because that probably happens in real life.
I mean, I've never been to one, but if I did go to one, I would be very upset if someone drugged me. I do not use drugs. I would be very upset, but they didn't seem to be too upset about it. So hopefully they're okay about it. There's a lot of time and workout dedicated to the groom's penis, as we've been talking about. In the summary, it makes it sound like the whole thing is his penis, but it's obviously about other things as well. I was also wondering why spend so much time discussing this man's penis, who by all accounts, it's just like nothing to write home about. He doesn't have like a huge penis, which would make him more popular at these sex parties, I'm sure. So he's like, well, at least then I should be able to last the entire time. Just be having sex the entire time. And he's like, well, I can't do that either. So he's like, oh, I'll try to stretch it. It doesn't work. He was like, how could I widen it? He's like, I don't even know how to do that. And so we get so much description about this man's penis. And I was just like, hilarious. But is there a purpose to doing that? And I think there might be. Again, I have no idea what the authorial intent is here for this, but first of all, everyone loves a dick joke, so that's obvious, okay? Even Shakespeare loved dick jokes too. Like every type of literature that you think is highbrow, James Joyce, dick jokes, okay? Along with many other jokes. He is joining in the tradition of, you think with the type of language that he uses in that very long run-on sentence, where there's all these big words that are also made up, that you would think, oh, this is more of a highbrow literary story if you were to only read that one section. And then he spends all this time talking about someone's dick. Oh, sorry, about his penis. Try to keep it a little bit more PG.
Yeah, I think we can be fluid in the way in which we describe his penis.
Mhm.
I thought it was very funny, Joey, because he says he has a bachelor's degree and a master's degree, and yet he cannot describe the color of his bride's eyes. Is that because they're indescribable, or does that mean that you literally don't have the language to do so because you're not as smart as you think you are, even though you have an amazing education? Joey, I can't believe I'm saying this out loud, but I will. Dicks are funny. They're just a funny organ. They have a purpose. They just kind of hang out there. They do their own thing. It's a funny thing. So I think that is why the trope throughout time is there, because objectively, they're odd. They're just funny looking. They do unpredictable things. Women do not have an equivalent external appendage that works in that way. So it's just kind of like, oh, well, that's something.
Yeah, it's unique.
So I think the fact that he is the moral of the story for me in this. One of this was like, he's so obsessed about it. He wants to be a good sexual partner to his fiance. They take 30 days off from their intercourse because they're like, we want to have the magic. We want to have the spark. I want to be good at my job. My job is to do this for my lady. I'm going to be great at it. But he was like, oh my God, there's just no way. I cannot not do this. He cannot not masturbate in his story. Then he does. Then he has shame about it. But I think he only has shame about it because obviously he stated he does this every day except for the month leading up to the wedding. So there's this weird, as you said, expectation, this cultural idea of what that is supposed to be about. He fails. He feels sad about his failure. And usually I would think that that would give him impotence, that he would be like, oh no, I can't go forward. And it's like, oh wait, he can't go down. He can't go in reverse. And so he was like a symbol of his shame because it's just going to do what it's going to do. And people are going to see this. And that's one of the things that I always thought was so interesting about male arousal. Women, we can kind of do our own thing and you don't know what's going on in here. And men, it's like, whoa, okay, hi. It was just something that he couldn't hide. And so the fact that he like used that little belt and he fell down and it went like a hula hoop around his ankle, that was just like the funniest image for me. And he was like, and nobody even noticed. And we're like, yeah, because nobody's staring at your crotch, dude. This is not a thing. But I just really loved all of that questioning of why is he obsessed? What did his bride want? Like, did she know he was being such a little freak about it? He's like, I'm aroused by elbows and knees and things that I'm not supposed to be because he's just obsessed. And he created his own obsession. So I just think that's also funny. What are we biologically predisposed to do? And what do we create in our own head that makes us just go out of our mind because we just can't keep it together?
What you were just saying made me think of something I hadn't thought about yet. You were asking, what is the purpose from abstaining from masturbation or sex in general with your fiance? I mean, you're fine. You're an adult. You can decide to do what you want with your own penis. But if we're talking about this idea of purity in a white wedding, is he trying to reclaim a part of his purity and sort of pressing the refresh button and being like, if I abstain from sex, even with my fiance or with other partners, if they are polyamorous or they have an open relationship or something, and even with masturbation, if he's trying to say like, if I just don't do anything to sexually satisfy myself, then I can start new from that. And it makes me think not of the Middle Ages, but very close. Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen herself, okay, who said that she basically was like, I'm a virgin now. She's not a virgin, but she's basically saying, I grew back my hymen and now I'm a virgin again. Okay.
That totally sounds like a thing, Joey. I think that's true.
Mind over matter. She's like, grow back. Okay. But this idea that we, as a Western culture, and probably all over really, to be fair, that we're just like obsessed with this idea of physical purity when it comes to sexuality. There's other traits that could make you think of purity and that it gets into eugenics there. But in terms of sexual purity, as a global civilization, why are we obsessed with this idea that we need to purify ourselves and abstain from sex? As you were talking about biology, it's ingrained in us biologically to have sex and to experience
that's
that pleasure.
Our only job, right? From an evolutionary standpoint, we are here to reproduce and our genes want to get into the next generation. So that is their whole motivation for being here.
I mean, even if it's not to procreate, because I'm not procreating, or if a woman had gone through menopause, she's not going to be able to procreate anyway. But anyway, I think just having a pleasurable experience, whether that's having sex or eating, drinking something, sleeping, doing a platonic activity that brings you joy, we're just hardwired as human beings or as animals in general to pursue these things. So why stop ourselves from doing something that would bring us joy in some way? And I think it's down to religion, to be honest.
It's religion, Joey. It's the patriarchy, which the mother actually mentioned in her speech. If I think back in time about what I know about arranged marriages, it was okay to have sex outside of your arranged marriage because marriage was about, in the ancient times, about property, about community, about family lines. It wasn't about love. And then we've had this change in society to say, well, maybe love is the point. Maybe love is the point. And I completely agree with you, Joey, that every person has the right to decide if they would like to reproduce or not. That's a very personal decision. But if we all decided, no thanks, I don't think having kids is a great thing, eventually the human race would die out.
And is that such a bad thing, really, though?
Given the state of the world at the moment, I'm not
Yeah.
going to take a side on that, Joey, but it is, as you said, pleasure seeking human activity. And we're also told not to be gluttons. We're not supposed to be alcoholics. There are a lot of things that we like to do that we're like, this is awesome. And society's like, you might want to just have a little moderation in all things. And so
Have
maybe
less
that is
fun.
also part of the moderation of you need to keep your sexual desires under wraps historically. Because for women, the consequence, especially before birth control, of having sex with even your husband is the possibility of getting pregnant, of dying in childbirth. There's just a lot that goes around that men, I think, have historically had less of a repercussion for impregnating someone because you're like, well, in May, but when I'm the woman who's pregnant, I can't be like, I didn't do it. Somehow this baby just got in here and
It worked
I
for
have no
Mary.
knowledge of that.
Worked for Mary.
It was a one and done. She was not able. Once one lady said that happened, nobody else could use
They
that
were
as an
like,
excuse.
okay, this Mary lady, she seems legit, but none of you bitches better say nothing
You,
about it.
no way, Jose. No way.
Again, I would like to ask this author if we should do a Q&A for us. Is this what you meant? Is this what you want to talk about? Because I think like it's so interesting, both of our interpretations of what we walked away from it, but what are other people going to hone in on? I mean, you're going to have to read this all about his penis, obviously, but what is the purpose of talking about this, really? Because we might be right, we might be wrong, according to what his intent was. But I also thought the penis is a necessary part of this transaction of marriage because, as you said, it's about procreation, traditionally, let's say. And let's just go there.
Well, we can go there, Joey, but I just wanted to say that this is a very heteronormative narrative.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah.
man and woman. If this was two guys or two women, I would still be curious if abstaining from sex before the wedding, how each of those parties felt about that and what was that for.
Yeah, and why the emphasis on genitals in general? I mean, that's not something that you would necessarily think about going to a wedding. Like, I wonder how many times they've done it since they got engaged. What could some of the reasons be that he would include this longer section about this guy's penis? And I think it's because this is his contribution to a marriage traditionally, if we're again talking about heteronormative relationships, where his purpose in this relationship is to now procreate and impregnate his soon-to-be wife. And I really like that, as you said earlier, that McIntosh subverts our expectations because you would think this would be a case of impotency that would be the issue. That's probably more of the norm that you would think in this situation. Oh, now he cannot perform. But now the problem is that he could perform too much. And so is this like more virility?
Yeah, and he said he had an erection but zero arousal. He's like, I am over that. I am so done, but my penis did not get the memo. That did not resolve. And I thought that was interesting. And back to the point that both the mother of the bride and the mother of the groom have a conversation out loud about when they think the bride is going to get impregnated. That's weird. The decision to have a child and when and how and all of the mechanics of that, I don't think should be the family topic of discussion. Personally. But clearly in the story, everybody thinks they have a dog in this fight, no pun intended. They all get to say what they think should happen and when and how. That's really curious. And this is an open invitation, Joey, as you said, to Malachi McIntosh. Please come answer our questions. We need to know so much more about this story than we can currently figure out on our own. What's up with the penis? Let's go.
Yeah, what's with all this dick stuff in here? I guess it doesn't really matter because at the end of the day, he put this out and now it's all of ours now. And so it doesn't matter what he has to say really about it. It'd be interesting, obviously. But yeah, I would be curious as to why other people think that there's such a heavy emphasis on this man's penis. It's a good story. I think it really subverts a lot of our expectations about a traditional heteronormative marriage and that it's okay to think outside the box. It doesn't have to be this picture perfect day that you could start your journey with your future partner at an orgy and still be happy, and that's valid.
Joey, does this remind you of Vigil, the wedding scene, where there is a bride and a groom who are getting it on? Jill's watching them. Do you remember this? Jill's watching them and she's in her spiritual form. And she was like, that was not the first time that they did it. And it was just very interesting. It's totally different stories, right? But this idea that this expectations of when and how and why you're supposed to be having sex with your partner when you have consummated your marriage, I just find that really quite interesting. And neither one of us have done that. So we do not get to state our own lived experience on that, but just such an interesting story.
Yeah, we could still have opinions about marriage just because neither of us have ever been married. I think this was an interesting story because it made us really dig deeply into what are we thinking is the motivation behind the story and what's important. We went from antiquity to now. That's a huge amount of time to be discussing things.
And it is still not resolved. There's no resolution to men and women and what they are really up to. So, Joey, next week we will be reading another story in this fun, sexy theme for April. It is Simon Rich's short story, Magical Mr. Goat. And I am very curious how that is going to work out for us.
Thank you, everyone, for watching or listening to today's episode. And if you liked it, please like, comment, and subscribe. And follow us on TikTok, please.
Great, Joey. We will see you next week.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.